तमस्तुमाविद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति।
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have great pleasure in introducing two of the very able public administrators and with whom I have had the pleasure of serving at different stages of service. But first of all, I will talk about Shri P.P. Singh. He has been both the Culture Secretary and also the Home Secretary of the Government of India. And what is very interesting is that he has been an author of 5 books, besides the book which is the subject of this course today. And as I said, what is very interesting is that he's got a number of fellowships. And I don't know how did he find the time while doing his main work. The Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship, the Queen Elizabeth Fellowship, and also Mahatma Gandhi National Fellowship. So he's obviously a very well-learned person and who has an inclination and flair toward this direction. As far as today's subject is concerned, I am no expert. I mentioned to him earlier also. But as I understand that the word Bahudha finds reference, and he can correct me, in the very first book of the humankind, that was the Rig Veda. And to my understanding, the nearest English translation to this term would be pluralism. There are certain dictums which perhaps will explain it well. One is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vedanti. The truth is one, but learned scholars say it in different ways. And second is, of course, the very well known Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Whole world is one family. I think in India, it's a country of such large population from the very beginning and large settlement. Under one roof, various faiths and beliefs have survived and coexisted together. And that has been the strength of our country. Of course, there were pressures and strains of trying to impose certain kind of faith and belief, but basically we have survived in a society, and even today, that is the strength of this country, that we all, in diversity, we find the strength. So let's hear the author's view today, but before I leave the floor to him, I would like to say a few words about Shri Vivekananda Singh. He was the Secretary of Defence Protection. That is the time from when I got to know him. I was in the Army headquarters and DGMO and Vice Chief, and later on the Chief. He then moved on to the Home Secretary and had a very distinguished career. And after he retired from that, because of his background, he was also a member of the Central State Commission. For 3 years they worked and produced a very voluminous work and very useful work. And I was actually inquiring from him as to how much of that has been used. Obviously the governments of the day, it depends on them, as to how much benefits they want to draw from that. But we move on to the subject of the day today, and I have great pleasure in inviting Shri V.P. Singh to talk on the subject of Bahudha.
Mr. President, General Beach, and dear friends, I thank you, General, for introducing me to this audience, some of whom know me quite well. He has said something which I may have to explain, but I will not do that now. How did I carry the two journeys, one of administration, the other the journey of mind, and how one helped the other and the other helped the one. That I will do if there is a question. I am going to speak to you on a subject, and I again would like to compliment Vivekananda International Foundation for slightly changing the title of the book. The title of the book is Bahudha and the post 9/11 world. He has made it, and appropriately so, Bahudha in the post 9/11 world. So I am conscious of this distinction, and therefore my lecture, which will be about 35-40 minutes, would be devoted to this aspect of Bahudha. I must tell you that I have been thinking about the global scene for quite some time and writing on it. And I used to call it Harmony Among Civilizations, even after the classic book by Huntington Kane called The Clash of Civilizations. When he wrote that, at that time, I was talking about harmony, and he came to see me in the beginning of '97. I was then culture secretary. And he thought that this is not going to take place. He again came to see me when I became the Union Home Secretary, thinking that since I have now to build a stick, have I changed my mind? And when I told him that no, I haven't, he was a bit disappointed, but we had very pleasant meeting. But he didn't see Bahudha in the post 9/11 world. But my thesis of harmony among civilizations did come to the notice of another great scholar, Francis Fukuyama. And he came to call on me, and at the World Bank, I was then executive director of the World Bank. Several people came at that time. But it was only after the catastrophe of 9/11, I was then the executive director of the World Bank. And when this incident took place, that morning I was in the office because there was a morning meeting. World Bank's two meetings are dreadful. One is the breakfast meeting, that is in the morning, and one is the dinner meeting, that is in the evening. The breakfast meeting begins at 6:30 a.m. The dinner meeting again begins at 6:30 p.m. Both are totally unsuited to us. So I had finished the breakfast meeting and I had come to my office, and I was relaxed. I was doing some reading, and suddenly the siren started, and which meant that from 12th floor I had to go down by staircase. And I was feeling, already tired and lazy. I said, I'm not going to do that. It must be some fire alarm and it will be over. But then my secretary came and he said that, why don't you put on the television? Something serious is happening. And the one tower had fallen in New York, the other tower fell while I was watching. Then I said, they will be shot down. Having been the Home Secretary, Government of India, I don't know what is wrong with the American Air Force. Why haven't they shot it down? Then I found that the Pentagon had been attacked. I said, now, there is something wrong with the American system of governance, defense governance. So I went down. About 2 weeks later, there was a seminar in one of the think tanks. This was a professor from Chicago University. I was invited to this seminar, and this was a small group. And the Honorable learned professor gave a talk on terrorism, and he was talking about the collision of nations. Because he was, the Americans were down. You can't expect any people not but to feel let down. And it was there that the chairperson, who was a lady, she knew me. And after the lecture, she praised India, that here is a country which has entertained many religions and treated them well, there is harmony. And she said that India may have the answer, and then praised me and introduced me to that select gathering, and I was told to provide the answer. I remember having said on that occasion, because I was not prepared. I hadn't gone there to give a talk. And then I said that, look, while India may have the answer, I don't have. And when the meeting was over, I was wondering, what would have been the answer of India? Fortunately, my term ended and I retired from the service. And I came, and I was joking to the General a little while ago that when my public office ends, I go and join the public library. So I went and told the librarian of India International Center that give me all the books of Sri Aurobindo, because I wanted to read him, didn't have the time while long years of service to see much of his writing except one or two small books. And he gave me something this big, this high, two sets in my cubicle. And such a prolific writer, he was one of the finest minds that India produced in the 19th and the 20th century. And at one place he was saying, which I got it purely by accident. He was a critique of Mahatma Ji. And at one place he writes that the British will not be able to find an answer to Gandhi's theory of truth and nonviolence. For the Western civilization had been so much corrupted because of this exploitative mechanism of colonialism that they have invoked, that they can't find an answer to this system that Gandhiji is starting. And then he writes, which made me ponder over, and he writes that the sign of a developed civilization is that it can put the problem in a word or two, and it can also provide the answer in a word or two. So I said, what would be the answer of this menace of terrorism? And then I couldn't have said truth and violence. Nobody would have read my book. And then I found suddenly one day that the answer is in that Vedic hymn, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. Over the centuries, and almost every religion of the world has been talking about Ekam Sat, one truth. And the moment you say one truth, that means that my religion is the truth, my God is the truth, my scripture is the truth. And the conflict begins. My God is superior, my holy book is superior. And I thought that the scholars after scholars, the learned man after learned man, have ignored the word Bahudha. And therefore I selected that. And I wanted to find out whether I can develop it as a thesis. And I found to my pleasant surprise that I started from Lord Mahavir's Anikant Bad to Nanak's brotherhood concept, Lord Mahavir, Lord Buddha, the middle path, Guru Nanak. And then I moved on to some of the finest rulers of India, Ashoka, Akbar and Nehru, I selected the three. Then I went to the contemporary builders of modern India, Swami Vivekananda, after whom this institution is named, Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi. They all advocated Bahudha. And Then I wanted to test it in the villages. I undertook a tour of 41 days of 7 villages of India and talked to the common people to test, is it violence or is it the concept of Bahudha that reigns in the countryside? And I found all that, and these are mentioned in the book. What is Bahudha? Etymologically speaking, the word Bahudha is derived from the word Bahu, and Dha is suffixed to it to make it an adverb. So, what does Bahudha mean? Bahu means many ways, or parts, or forms, or directions. It is used to express manifoldness, much and repeated. When the word is used with the root tree, it means to make manifold or multiply. Bahudha is also used as an expression of unremittent continuity in various time frames. It is used to express frequency, as in time again. Bahudha suggests an eternal reality or continuum, a dialogue of harmony and peaceful living in society. Pluralism could be the closest equivalent to Bahudha in the English language. Pluralism had been described in various ways in history and sociology and politics, but what I am interested in, that pluralism has to be seen in the context of the coexistence of nation state and ethnicity, equality and identity issues. The Bahudha approach recognizes that there is this distinction between plural societies and pluralism. Pluralism is an inevitable ingredient of democratic societies. The role of religion, language and ethnicity is very significant in plural societies. Pluralism in this context is an imperative for both developed and developing societies. The culture of Bahudha is deeply rooted in the inculcation of a special attitude from an early age. Dialogue requires a state of mind where one can strongly believe in one's own way of looking at issues while simultaneously accommodating another's point of view. It is this mental discipline that makes one willing to consider the validity of other person's viewpoint. In short, Bahudha means celebration of diversity and also to have an attitude of mind that I must share the other person's point of view with respect because he may perhaps be right. And if you have that attitude of mind, I don't think one can join a group of jihadis or suicide squads. And this inculcation of the attitude of mind is crucial. And this is what this book has tried to say. But now I come to the contribution of this Vivekananda International Foundation. They want me to look at it, Bahudha, in the post-9/11 world. Today, Mr. President, the threat to peace comes from several areas: poverty and inequality, ecological challenges, religious fundamentalism and terrorism, and geopolitics. We are living in a world where geopolitics is both changing rapidly in character and content. Threats to peace are visible in different parts of the world due to geopolitical ambitions of nation states. Let me put it in 5 topics. First, the inculcation of religion in pursuit of geopolitical objectives has first complications. The proclamation of a terrorist caliphate, as you all know, ISIS, is conflict within a religion. between the Shias and the Sunnis. And it becomes very difficult when the self-proclaimed state of the caliphate has tanks and military men, well-built territory under their control, and skills in propaganda of their atrocity. The fragmentation of state orders, if you look from Tripoli to Bahudha, has facilitated this development. Second, in East Asia, the South China Sea has become a bone of contention. The US, Japanese, and the Chinese naval fleets are circling each other. This has sent alarms in the whole region. Third, the annexation of Crimea and the drowning of MS-17 have created new challenges. The ambition of Russia has generated new fears. The strategic Black Sea, in which Russia has vital interests, is bordered by Georgia and Ukraine. Fourth, the Israel-Palestine conflict, if it is not addressed, then the Arab-Israel conflict can keep generating fresh problems in the region. And finally, and that is very important, the liberal thinkers of the 21st century had thought that the coming of the internet would usher in a shared global commons of information, and this in turn will effectively deal with hostility that was characteristic of the Cold War era. But this has not taken place. Today there are authoritarian rules in Russia, China, and a number of other countries, which is capitalist in economics and nationalist in ideology. Capitalism has led with both liberal democracy and authoritarian regimes. It is value neutral. The hopeful sign is that neither the United States, nor the Russians, nor the Chinese want to return to the Cold War era. But this by itself does not put an end to nationalist aspirations. The other thing which I wanted to mention to you, and I did not go deep, that the mass protests that have taken place starting from the Jasmine Revolution, then the Occupy, the Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, and anti-graft movement in India, are mostly in democracies, but there are also mass protests in authoritarian rules. In the last century, the Tiananmen Square of 1989, in the current century, mass demonstrations in Moscow in 2011 and 2012 are examples in this behalf, and now what is happening in Hong Kong is another area. What is important to notice here is that this requires a new kind of battery. What would be that new approach? Because in today's world, including in India, the youth are searching hope based on doing better in this world, here and now. They are no longer believers in fate, nor do they entertain the belief in some future better world, either on earth or in heaven. In the second half of the 20th century, economic and social modernization became global in scope. But despite globalization taking firm roots, the concept of identity, the concept of nation state has not got diminished. And this sense of hope is on one side, there is a sense of humiliation on the other. There are several countries where people, and particularly the boys and girls, are hopeful for their future, but at the same time, there are others who think that they are being exploited, their resources are being controlled by imperialist powers. And as a result, intolerance is on the rise. Now, all this, plus one simple fact that we have spent, the world has spent, not we, more than $2 trillion US since 2001 over military force to find out, to control, contain the extremism that is rapid. But the political children, as I call it, of Osama bin Laden is rising in number. You kill one, another or two more will come up. And our neighbor and that famous mind, you all know him, Lee Kuan Yew, he put it beautifully once when he said that you kill one bee, but the mother bee is there to produce more. So more will come to bite you. Now, what do we do? And therefore, I have said that if hatred can be taught, love can also be taught. And the Bahudha approach has the answer. But how do we secure Bahudha? And we have identified four. First is called religious harmony. Second is educational programming. Third is the strengthening of international political architecture, the United Nations in particular. And fourth, the use of military power in terms of the UN Charter. Towards the end of the 19th century, Nietzsche said God is dead. We have all become rationalists. So we won't be guided by those rituals and forms of beliefs which have hitherto controlled our behavior. He felt that the age of reason has dawned and started asserting itself. But by the end of the 20th century, it was quite clear that religion is kicking and alive and influencing world events. Politicians, journalists, and scholars have started realizing and often exploiting the extremely powerful help of the religious motives of citizens and the need to use their beliefs in the promotion of development, peace, and happiness in society. And any scholar will find now that religious studies, religious literature has expanded in quantum all over the world. Religion is a potent force. This is what I say in Bahudha. As an agent for generation of peace and happiness, it facilitates goodwill among people and helps them to lead a life of spirituality and fulfillment. In recent years, people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King have used it for achieving justice and freedom. Swami Vivekananda and Mother Teresa were inspired by their religious faiths to serve the poor, the derelict, and the discarded. And Islamic teachings too. You know, it was Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi who beautifully wrote about the Islamic faith. The lamps are different, but the light is the same. It comes from beyond. There are similar expressions in other religions as well. Such ideas strengthen the logic that there can be salvation outside the church or the synagogue, outside the temple or the monastery, and outside the mosque or the gurdwara. Even under the guidance of the same scripture, different communities have developed different ways of worship and communion with the Creator. This in turn has created manifold forms of religious dialogue and forms of worship. I will come to religion again, but I am just leaving it with the thought that religion is a powerful force in human affairs. The second is education program. Education has a central role to play in building a harmonious society. Education must begin at home, as it is here that intolerance towards other faiths has its origins. We know that it is not only love and compassion, but also hatred and intolerance that are widespread. There is an urgent need to focus on education curriculum, because I am aware, and all of you are aware, that the content in textbooks spreads hatred in some textbooks or distorts history. But educational curriculum in several countries has become an ideological battleground, and one has to look at the education curriculum solely from one angle, that does it create hatred? Does it undermine other faiths? And if the text of the books satisfy this, from my side, I have no problem. Education must strive to create in young minds a willingness to tolerate differences of opinion and the desire to understand different points of view. Second, the massive progress in science and technology has been able to stress the intellectual content, but it should also be reoriented to emphasize on moral and spiritual issues, because this intolerant ethos can disappear only when the child is educated to respect. Then I come to the international political architecture of the United Nations. Resolving conflict, however, goes much beyond education. Towards this end, the UN has to be strengthened in terms of its charter. As we look towards the future, it appears that the prevailing nation-state system would continue to be a primary structure in coming decades and centuries. An international order based on the rule of law and consent of nation-states can alone be an effective conflict independence. The education, the UN is the best forum for a generation of understanding among nation-states in the realm of politics and economy. The unity among present and future members of the Security Council would be essential to anticipate problems and to arrive at creative solutions in a crisis situation. The UN needs to be reorganized in several ways by expanding the Security Council to reflect present-day political and economic realities, and by funding a permanent peacekeeping force. An empowered economic and social council would also enable us. The question is often posed, and that is about the role and relevance of the military. And I have said here that terrorism justifies that. But this must be done in accordance with law. We as district states have often used force to quell disturbances, but we are accountable under the law. It has to be in terms of law. And if we don't follow that, then it will be very difficult to have a peaceful world. The UN Charter calls upon member states to attempt to settle disputes peacefully. And in terms of Article 51, the states have to give that kind of support. The Security Council, which consists of 15 members, 5 permanent, is mandated to play a vital role in maintenance of peace in the world, but this is not happening, because on every issue there is a threat of a veto. Now, how do we deal with this problem? But a look at the current architecture of international institutions is called for, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister of India on September 27, 2014 in the UN General Assembly rightly said that if we don't do that, as he put it, institutions that reflect the imperatives of the 20th century won't be effective in the 21st. It would face the risk of irrelevance, and we will face the risk of continuing turbulence with no one capable of addressing. Now, another question I must address on Bahudha. How we do this interfaith dialogue. And I have suggested that the ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council, should have an interfaith council. And I have also identified in this book and also in my papers and lectures on the subject that we must encourage meeting of practitioners of different faiths so that they could discuss and find out what is their individual spiritual experience and how there could be a commonality to help the society. If the spiritual leaders speak in the same voice, this is to inspire their followers to feel the oneness and not the division among faiths. I have also advocated group pilgrimages of people of different faiths to the sites of the spiritual value of the respective religions. This could be a part of either the Economic and Social Council or a separate organization under the UN as a specialized agency. The second question that had to be understood is Bahudha and non-believers. Out of 7 billion people, I am told by some newspaper, I don't have the firm figure, that more than 1 billion people are non-believers out of 7, like agnostics, atheists, and anti-religionists. In perception of non-believers, religion is only a social or cultural formality, but ethical and moral belief and respect for rule of law are very strong among these non-believers, and this is a welcome feature. Can we make them see Bahudha approach as a secular approach? Not only it applies to interfaith dialogue, but it also applies to problem solution, which goes beyond faith. And this is where I have laid emphasis that we have to ignore Ekam Sat and go for Bahudha. Now, what can you do? I was telling somebody that if the Shias of Syria and Iraq had a choice between a Muslim country of Saudi Arabia or Jordan or India, they would prefer India, not a Muslim country. Therefore, we must find out within the religion itself how to deal with the differences. Therefore, I see the relevance of the Bahudha approach both for religious and secular issues. In fact, I have consciously taken this concept out from the religious closet of conflicts among religions and conflicts within a religion to the secular realm. Dialogue is essential to resolve differences of views pertaining to geopolitical issues like territorial disputes, or even to arrive at a conclusion about the role of the state in affairs of citizens. I have a lot more to say, but I hope something will come during the question hour. I have little more and then I will conclude. I am concerned about jihadism as a philosophy, and I personally feel that the Bahudha approach should enable the moderate Muslims. And I don't make a distinction between good Talibans and bad Talibans. They are all bad. But there are moderate Muslims. And it is for them to modernize their society. And these elements alone can stop the extremists from producing persons of their ilk. But majority of the Muslims have nothing to do with terrorism or extremism. A worldwide coalition is necessary to fight the spread of hatred that these extremist forces are fanning in the respective societies and beyond. We in India are particularly concerned about terrorism, and we live in a very dangerous neighborhood, and you all know about activities of the Taliban, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Harkatul Mujahideen, Al-Badr, and now ISIS. I was very happy again with President Obama's address again on September 24, 2014 in the General Assembly. For the first time, the US President said, and I quote him, "We reject any suggestion of clash of civilizations. Belief in permanent religious war is the misguided refuge of extremists who cannot build or create anything and therefore peddle only fanaticism and hate." This was the most clear statement made since the national security document that was issued after 2001. Now, what kind of new political order will be, and I will conclude after that. First, the tragedy of 9/11, followed by terrorist attacks on the Indian Parliament and in Madrid, London, Chechnya, Jammu and Kashmir, Bali and Mumbai, had erected new walls. The walls built are not physical structures, but a reflection of mind walls. It is imperative to pull down these mind walls in order to build a harmonious world. Second, no one country or group of countries can determine the course of this world. There has to be a partnership. We need a genuine dialogue and engagement between countries. Thus, in rebuilding international institutions, we need to be guided by an idealism that accords each nation state a place under the new sun, commensurate with its political and economic strength. Some of you who know Hindi, this was best expressed, I found, by a Hindi poet called Nagarjuna. Some of you must have known him. And he writes, "नए गगन में नया सूरज जो चमक रहा है, ये विशाल भूखंड आज जो दमक रहा है, मेरी भी आभा है उसमें." The moment when you build a new world, you must give everybody a place, howsoever small or howsoever big that nation or state may be. Let me conclude. Human nature will continue to be a balance of opposites, love and hatred, peace and violence, truth and falsehood, usefulness and self-centeredness, saintliness and sinfulness, and the spiritual and the physical. In fact, these opposite units are closely connected to one another. The greatness of the human mind lies in building a system that is inclusive and judicious, and one that ensures dialogue among persons, groups, and nations. Towards this end, religion and spirituality, education and culture, and global political and economic institutions have major roles to play. While fundamentalist religious forces are likely to continue to dominate political discourse for some time to come, it is not likely to be a permanent feature of the world. Because fundamentalism cannot satisfy growing human aspirations or meet the challenges of modernization. Thus, the present hold of extremist organizations over its followers in the Islamic world and elsewhere gradually loosen and eventually recede. My sense of optimism and confidence that nation states would cooperate in elimination of terrorist violence make me believe that the menace of terrorism in its present form would become a thing of the past in the coming decades. But we will have to simultaneously discard ideas like "my God is superior to yours," teaching hatred can secure national integrity, using terrorist groups in pursuit of national goals, and dismantle infrastructure that breeds hatred and imports training for terrorist acts. I believe that civilizations don't clash. Savagery does. Viciousness, duplicity, and lack of trust can only be addressed through a dialogic process and by cultivating an attitude of mind that embraces both listening and recognition of truths other than one's own. Should we make should we not make Bahudha a global creative venture, a cornerstone of liberal democracy and the plural world? And I feel that this is for all of us. Facebook and Twitter and other forms of social media can be used to spread the message of Bahudha approach, both in times of conflict and in times of peace. Let me conclude. The study of society and behavior of people has always fascinated me. I am aware that both peace and conflict characterize humanity, and also the fact that the ideas do influence the course of history. My approach to history and politics is based on my deep optimism that the world must and could be improved. In fact, it is my belief that the 21st century would provide peace and a brighter future to the world. That famous gentleman, Hegel, wrote something which I thought I would end with. He said, he said that some of you might have read his book, The Power of the Powers, which was published in 1988. And he writes, and I quote him, the real question is whether the brighter future is really always so distant. What if it has been here and only our blindness and weakness has prevented us from seeing it? I feel that the Bahudha approach to global politics and affairs is the answer, because today all of us have to make a choice between the clash of civilizations or the Bahudha approach, and the choice is ours. I thank you for your attention. And I would be happy to take any question. Please. But after the check, I will get some water.